Good evening, and welcome back to Flashback, where I go back to the first game in a long-running franchise to see if it still holds up to modern gamer scrutiny. And today, it's time to rev up some old engines. I've enjoyed playing racing games, since racing games first started. I remember spending a lot of my time as a kid playing Night Driver and Grand Prix on my Atari 2600. I've even given plenty of time to RC Pro-Am and Super Mario Kart back in the day. However, racing games really didn't get huge until the 90s with the jump to polygons. Now we could see realistic-looking cars conveying a realistic sense of speed. One series that has been with gamers since that new era began was Electronic Arts' Need for Speed franchise. And today it's time to see if the first entry can still get the checkered flag. Now, with the exception of goofy combat racers like the Mario Kart games or the criminally underappreciated Split Second, auto racing games tend to fall into one of two distinct camps. There are the simulation racers, like Forza Motorsport and Gran Turismo, which provide realistic physics and handling to make driving so much like real life that the games could be used for driver's license tests. Okay, those who like Gran Turismo probably don't want me mentioning license tests, but I digress. Then there are the arcade racers, where physics are purposefully floaty, calling for hard power sliding at top speeds and plowing through opponents like a defensive tackle, as seen in series like Ridge Racer and the Cruisin' franchise. The Need for Speed series, however, has always tried to straddle the line between the two schools of racing. In fact, it tried to straddle the line literally in Need for Speed Shift. The handling in the games, even up to the latest entry Heat from 2019, has always been too tight for the arcade crowd, but too loose for the sim fans. However, it managed to work, with the series' only significant competition in the arena being the much more low-key Test Drive series, which I'll probably get to on a flashback at some point later on. The other thing that the Need for Speed series has had in its pocket was its willingness to mix things up with each entry. The series could easily shift from focusing on police chases in Hot Pursuit, to Fast and the Furious style street races in Carbon, to cross-country treks in The Run. Need for Speed has always been a fluid series, ready to try something new with the style and structure, but still keeping a happy medium with the actual racing engine. With all this in mind, I was eager to load up the first game, which released on 3DO in 1994, DOS in 1995, and PlayStation and Saturn in 1996. For the record, the version I loaded up for this installment of Flashback was the Saturn version, mainly because it was the one I got my hands on first. Now, the first thing I noticed was that the original Need for Speed bore the license for Road and Track magazine. Apparently, Road and Track worked with EA to get the handling of the cars down in the first game, and really nothing more. Now, barely using a prominent license was nothing new to EA, even at the time. People may remember in a previous flashback how John Madden only really showed up for the title card in the original John Madden Football on Genesis. So I really can't hold the limited involvement of that magazine against the game. However, there's plenty I can hold against it. Modes and options are anemic for a racer compared to today. There are 4 modes: Time Trial, Head-to-Head, Single Race, and Tournament. There is split-screen multiplayer for 3 of those modes, leaving out the Time Trial. There are 6 different areas to drive in, a few of which have multiple tracks to race, and the time of day can be customized somewhat to provide decent variety with the racing environment. That's all well and good, but what's really hard to stomach nowadays is the limited number of cars. In the Saturn and PlayStation versions of the game, there are only 9 cars to use with 1 more to unlock. Yeah, only 9. Sure, they're all high-end vehicles, It's not like you're having to drive a Ford Festiva for hours before you can jump into a Ferrari. However, garages in the single digits are pretty much unacceptable for racing fans now, unless they're actually playing an arcade port. Hell, the cars can't even be customized under the hood or even with their paint jobs. That's just criminal. If the options weren't limited enough to dissuade newer players, then the gameplay and aesthetics certainly would. Coming out early in the 5th console generation, naturally the visuals are very rough. The car models are chunky, with very basic geometry. Fortunately, the environments have decent textures for the time, and there's amazingly no pop-in at the horizon, which actually plagued many racing games of the era. There are even multiple cameras to choose from, including an impressive for its time driver's view. However, there's one element of the visuals that's absolutely unacceptable, no matter what kind of gamer you are: the sense of speed. Put simply, it's not here. Watch this footage right here. The speedometer says I'm holding around 150 to 160 miles per hour, but that's not at all reflected by what I'm seeing. The driving looks about as fast as my regular commute home, and I certainly don't commute on the Autobahn. The game can't even use its age as an excuse, since Test Drive 4, which came out only a year later, definitely provides a good sense of speed even now. You feel like you're actually racing in Test Drive 4, whereas the original Need for Speed feels more like an everyday trip on the highway. Of course, despite how slow the game feels while trying to claim it's fast, you still have trouble winning races because of the handling and the AI. Showing up before the advent of analog thumbsticks really hurt the game's control. Having to use a D-pad, if you don't have a third-party steering wheel, means that your car will always turn too hard, making tackling curves a headache. Even feathering the controls hardly helps. The car barely holds the road. That becomes a major problem since the AI-controlled opponents are practically unbeatable. There are no difficulty settings of any kind, and the AI always uses cars that you don't have access to outclass you in every race. Again, those with a steering wheel may get a different experience, but as far as I'm concerned, if a game requires getting otherwise optional peripherals just to be playable, then it's not a game to play. If you hope that playing two-player split screen would be better, don't. The visuals take a severe hit with frame rate sputters and plenty of pop-in. Yeah, the very same pop-in that's absent in single player. It may seem like I went in hard on the original Need for Speed, but that's only because racing games have come a long way in 25 years. I'm not ragging on it because it's from the 5th console generation. Other racing games from the era, including the original Gran Turismo and the aforementioned Test Drive 4, are still enjoyable now. Hell, the Need for Speed sequels from the time, like Need for Speed High Stakes, can still be plugged in and enjoyed. However, the original simply doesn't hold up anymore. It did break plenty of new ground for racing games in the mid-90s. It is an important benchmark of the genre, but it just isn't worth playing now. This is one old racer that definitely shouldn't come out of retirement for another lap. So what do you think? Have I been too harsh? Want to complain that I was playing the Saturn version rather than the one on PlayStation? Any other franchises I should feature on Flashback? Leave a comment below or send it to my Twitter. My handle's right there. Like these trips down memory lane? Please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I also have a Patreon. $1 a month gets your name in the credits of future videos. Next time I'm starting the 8th tour of Outlaw Golf 2. Thanks so much for joining me on Flashback, and game on.